The next session is going to be chaired by Mr. Prashant Tripathi, who's the Director, Market Access, Yacht Bukhare India Private Limited. And he's going to be joined by Dr. Sindhura Ganpati, who's PSA Fellow in the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India. And would be joined by Mr. Ranjit Mukundanan, CEO, Managing Director, and co-founder, Stellabs Technologies Private Limited. We're going to discuss digital livestock ecosystem for farmer profitability. So let's have the next one, the fight chat.
Thank you. It is really great to be sitting with two real-world impact makers joining me for the discussion and talking about digitalization in dairy. As we are relatively a short session, we would try to get to the root of this incredible migration of values to the digital world that may no longer be available in traditional capital markets. One of my mentors always said, when change comes, opportunities abound. We are about to enter a period of fast-paced technological change in all human history, which is also very true with the Indian dairy market. So without wasting any time, I would like to start with Sindhura, as currently you are focusing on building national program with the government of India. Just walk us through what is National Digital Livestock Mission and how it works.
Hi Prashant, thank you, and nice to be with you and Ranjit and with the NASCAM group. Very good to be part of this event. My background is a veterinarian and I grew up as a son of a smallholder farmer. Even though, to answer your question, I am coming from the point of view of government, where I work as part of the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office with the ministry, etc. Everything is incorporating my own experience, so it will probably be reflecting both sides. The NDLM that you refer to, National Digital Livestock Mission, is quite an ambitious program undertaken by Ministry of Fisheries and Animal Husbandry, the Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairying, with National Dairy Development Board, NDDB. And I work with them closely, provide technical and thought partnership, but it is really the ministry's program for the country. At the heart of it is using building digital architecture for the country that is enabling. That enabling word is critical. For too long, we have not really focused on this sector. I keep referring to animal husbandry because it is intentional, it is beyond dairy. Dairy is the most dominant part of it, but we have a lot of opportunity to bring other aspects of animal husbandry, whether it is sheep, whether it is goats and other pigs and the broader livestock sector along with it. The core of National Digital Livestock Mission is to build that enabling architecture so that farmer at the center of it is able to manage his or her own livelihood, being able to see the animal records, being able to get the services from the government, being able to connect with the market, being able to be visible to the market, and the government on its behalf being able to connect with the beneficiary, which is the farmer, provide direct beneficiary transfer, or having the market having the traceability so that products that make it through the domestic or international market can be connected back to the farmer. So all of this is part of the National Digital Livestock Mission. If it sounds somewhat like National Digital Health Mission, it is because it has some of those same flavors. How Aadhaar revolutionized identification and built programs on top of that. How digitization of ASHA workers and frontline health workers led to that sector being transformed. How now, through the National Digital Health Mission, we patients, as humans, patients, are able to have access to our own records, get services from whether it is private sector or government sector, and that having continuity. All of that has the flavor in National Digital Livestock Mission and beyond, because it has certain uniqueness and unique needs, such as breeding programs, such as disease surveillance and disease tracking, such as building export-oriented market that can take our sector beyond dairy and other sectors into the next level of transformation for which the potential exists. And our own manufacturing industry, whether it is animal vaccine manufacturing industry or other private sectors, can get to the level of how human vaccine manufacturing industry has now go playing the global role. So that is at the heart of National Digital Livestock Mission. And there are many nuances and specifics on how digitization can help, but the goal is 5%. I always keep saying it is about 5% technology, 95% outcomes, incentives, and how a sector needs to be connected through these events, not the digital as the front of the railway. It is the outcome which is at the front, and digital sectors play enabling role.
Thanks a lot, Sindhura, like very well articulated. And this actually brings me, because you used the word enabler, and I think like we have another guest like Ranjit, whom I personally see he has been acting like an enabler since last 1 decade in the dairy sector. So Ranjit, just coming to you, like what has been your experience in last 1 decade? What were some of the key challenges and wins that you have seen?
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. Thanks, Dr. Sindhura. Thanks, the NASCON team. I'd like to pick on 2 points that Dr. Sindhura mentioned and try to marry it with your question, Prashant. One, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't see someone like Dr. Sindhura advising the government on how to sort of digitize, professionalize a livestock mission. So the fact that we have thorough professionals like Dr. Sindhura advising the government, I almost see it analogous to what in mid-90s Sam Pitroda did to the telecom industry, right? So, and Dr. Sindhura tried to do that to the agri and livestock industry, and this probably was probably virtually unheard of in the agri sector when we started 10 years ago. Things have changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, but this is a hard sector, it's a hard problem. It takes time and patience for things to evolve, but I'm really glad to see from the time we got started, I come from a telecom background, had nothing to do with agriculture, but last 10 years, I've seen a lot of shifts. I wouldn't say tectonic shifts, but certainly encouraging shifts. All of us have seen the per capita consumption go up from below 250 grams per capita to about 415 grams per capita per day, which is good. We were below WHO standards. We are up there thriving and beating the barriers. I've seen that. When we started, the organized sector was probably about 20%, 80% was unorganized, but more closer to maybe 25, 30. And given the size of the sector, every percentage is huge, right? Yeah. We have pre-harvest, post-harvest put together, talking about 7.6% of our GDP, 300 million cattle, 560 million liters of milk per day. Every percent is huge, right? So though it might seem small, 25 to 30, 5% shift is a big shift from unorganized to organized. Also noticed things like agri inputs being more freely available to the farmers, things like feed, cattle nutrition. Farmers were left to fend for themselves using all the local, regionally available agri inputs. But today, you have good mechanisms wherein agri inputs are made available to the dairy holder farmers. Cooperative movement has really picked up. We have pioneering work done by the Amuls, the mother dairies, the Sudha milks of the world, right? And market linkage has been really taken off in a big way. And private players have really done a really super duper job in enabling this and catalyzing this, right? For example, when I started way back in 2010 in this sector, maybe about 25 to 30% was private and about 70% of the organized was cooperative. As we speak, it's more like 50-50. So you have folks like Hudson, ITC, Britannia, Nestle, all of them have sort of done their bit. So that's very encouraging. So it shows that the environment is conducive for private parties to come and accelerate the market linkages. What we have done in this whole thing is, as Dr. Sindhura mentioned, use digitization as an enabler and a catalyst. We know that it can't be an end goal in itself, right? It has to be bundled with market linkages, incentives, training, advocacy, advisory, a whole slew of things for us to shift the orbit. Typically, this entire dairy supply chain has been built in a supply forward manner. I still remember as kids, standing in queues to buy milk. We don't do that anymore. We click and the milk is there at your doorstep. So the quantitative sufficiency problem has been solved quite well, right? And thanks to, again, really some pioneering work done by the cooperatives. We're now trying to try and stand on the shoulders of these giants and build further and shift this orbit to a more quality-oriented orbit, shift the orbit to more platform and ecosystem-led orbit. Can the farmer producing milk in the remotest part of a Begusarai or a Samastipur or a Saharanpur, right, or a Davangere or a Mangalore, can that milk find its way to the best possible demand point? So that from a quality assurance point of view, why shouldn't India become the export hub? Why should it be a small place like New Zealand that does most of it? Right? We have the wherewithal, right? We have the technical capabilities. We have the traceability linkages. We have the digitization being built across the collection centers, chilling centers, farms. How do you put it all into one cohesive story, link it up with various other components, so that at the end of the day, we can shift the orbit from what has been built by pioneers like Amul and take it to the next level. So our journey has been focused on that. How do I use things like animal wearables to help improve animal productivity levels? How do I use real-time grading and payments to ensure that the farmers can convert milk into currency in real time? How do I ensure that new to credit farmers we can do credit assessment of new to credit farmers so that they can shift their orbit from a smallholder farmer into a agripreneur level farmer. So our tech interventions has been in that legacy, in that scheme of things. We have made good progress. We're hoping to make more progress by linking into schemes like NDLM and other government initiatives and shift the orbit further.
Thanks a lot, Ranjit. You have talked about enabling the farmers in the remote locations. You have talked about like how farmers in Begusarai, they are also being connected through digitalization. Actually, this like I would go to Sindhura and ask you, Sindhura, how do you think with the NDLM coming in and also with the private players, how this digital infrastructure that is being created is going to further enable the remotest farmer and also create the social inclusion? And also trying to tries to focus on, or just focus on something that, sorry, can I just reframe the question? Okay. Just taking the cue from Ranjit, Sindhura, I would like to come to you because Ranjit has just talked about connecting the remotest farmer, and just throw some light on how NDLM and other digitalization platforms that, for example, coming from Stell Apps, are enabling the farmers to further create a. Can I just go again? I'm sorry. Just taking the cue from Ranjit, Sindhura, I would like to come to you and just share how initiatives like NDLM are actually creating the social inclusion and bringing the remotest farmer into the net and helping them enhance their profitability and margins that they make. Over to you.
Thank you, Prashant. Yeah. Just like how Ranjit recollected his experiences standing in a queue to buy milk, I recollected my experience standing in the queue to pour milk in a remote part of India. And thanks to cooperative sector and movement, many parts of the country were included in the milk grid. And so now we are looking at how to take it to the next level when it comes to dairy. To answer your question, we now have to bring the market to the farmer, and that's what digital infrastructure can do. For example, in sheep and goats sector, it has largely been unorganized, and it's amazing to me that in India we have such large numbers of sheep and goat, 20 crore animals, one of the largest in the world. Over the years, we have not really focused as much. So that shows me an amazing resilience in the sector that gives me hope that with enough focused intervention in building this sector, we can actually take it to the next level and sky is the limit. To give you a specific example, one of the pilots that will be launched by in partnership with Karnataka and NEML, National E-Marketing Limited, to try to digitize the interaction between the buyers and the sellers in the sheep and goat sector. Where if I am a small, if I keep 5 sheep, Oftentimes, I have financial distress. I don't know what is the market price. I have to rush and sell, so oftentimes I may get taken advantage because I don't have the knowledge nor the framework in which to sell. And I see this as an amazing opportunity that government will be helping, and these kind of private sector will be stepping in. And this allows you to take the market to the doorstep, where you can actually allow the information on farmers to be available. You can see the pictures of my animals. You can see the background information on the animals, and the animals will be uniquely identified so that the buyers will not be we can feel assured, and the digital transaction of money can take place immediately so that there is no chance of that not happening afterwards. So you can build a lot of safety net around it, transparency around it, and connectivity around it, so that the market can go beyond word of mouth, which is the current issue right now. That is, while the milk has largely been connected to a milk grid, although there is scope for improvement even now in milk and dairy sector in many parts of the country. What has happened in Gujarat hasn't happened in, say, necessarily in northeastern India or other places. There's a lot of opportunity to bring that along as well. And now we don't need to go step by step. That is the opportunity we have as a country. Look at digital payment. We didn't go step by step by step. We, just like how in mobile, we didn't go landlines to everybody and then mobile to everybody and then to the next level. We skipped some steps. And digital payment, having lived in US, India has progressed far beyond what my experience had been there. And we can do that in these sectors. We can skip a few steps and take our own Indian experience and build it for that context and nuances, and bring those farmers into the fold. To answer one part that you asked, social inclusion, it's not a given. We need to actively work towards it.
Yeah.
This is one place where rising tide will not raise all the boats. We have to actually build that intentionally to bring those marginalized farmers and talking about gender, bring the women into this, and not just bring them into the fold when we build digital infrastructure. We actually have to envision a future where they are just as dominant decision makers, participants in the sector in a visible way, and envision that and build the architecture so that that comes to fruition. And then we have the opportunity to do that. And technology has a huge role to play, and companies like Stellabs or other banking sectors and pretty much everybody has huge role to play here, as long as we are looking at that vision in a comprehensive way.
Thanks a lot, Sindhura. You have touched a very beautiful point. And just like with this, I would like to go to Ranjit, because Ranjit, Sindhura just mentioned about banking and like women empowerment. You like in last 10 years, like when you have been implementing these technologies, how do you see this new ecosystem developing, this new digital ecosystem developing? Please touch on 2 points, like what kind of other enablements digitalization has brought to the agriculture in a broader sense, and specifically to the dairy. Like talk about institutions, other institutions that are coming in, and also talk about what kind of changes in women empowerment or in involvement of women have you seen through in the regions where you have implemented your technologies?
Yeah. So just to set the context, right? Dairy is 1/3 of agriculture in India is dairy. Right? It's a highly fragmented market. Smallholder farmers, as I said, 300 million cattle, 7.6% of our GDP, 80 million dairy farming families, touch cattle one way or the other. So in terms of sheer number of individuals, that's the size of the US population, right? That's the size we're talking about, right? And the only way we can disaggregate and sort of get into an ecosystem play, make sure that the banks have a role to play, the insurance companies have a role to play, is digitization. And again, I don't mean to say tech is the end goal, but that's a very simple fundamental enabler that can help us shift those few steps that Dr. Sindhura mentioned, right? Once you then the economics economies of scale will kick in. Once you digitize, you have the digital highway rolled out. All the farmers are hooked in. And it's sort of, for some organization, for an organization like NASCOM, it's a really interesting area, mainly because a tech is probably the first step to making sure that the digital highway is in place. Right? We've dabbled around with things like animal recognition, facial recognition of animals, so that animal identification, animal Aadhaar can become more foolproof, animal wearables, cloud-based real-time payment, solutions, cold chain monitoring to ensure that the milk being the most perishable, how do you ensure that the cold chain integrity is not broken? So it's sort of an engineer's paradise in terms of putting out the best in data science, the best in analytics, the best in cloud. This is probably where you can deploy, not in the automotive sector, not in the other sector. This is probably the place where the fundamental sciences like veterinary sciences, nutrition, engineering components, the software elements can all come together to set this digital highway in motion. Right? Having said that, what we have done in the last 10 years is to ensure that we look at the supply chain as one cohesive whole. You can't try to solve the problem the way US has solved it. You can't try to solve the problem the way Europe has solved it. A lot of us look at it that way because it's sort of good to sort of try to replicate that blueprint, but it doesn't work that way. The farms in the US and Europe are larger, so you can focus on farm automation, right? Here, it's not about farm automation alone. The farm size is too small for that to be the starting point. There are folks focusing on only pre-harvest, folks focusing only on post-harvest. But if you are to run a company which also attracts private capital that where IRR is important, not just developmental capital, then you also need to ensure that it's run in a way that it can attract capital from a good returns point of view. So how do you do that? Because people get put off saying, oh, these are too hard a problem, smallholder farmers, only developmental organizations can play a role, but that isn't true. If you actually look at it as one continuum of pre and post harvest, there's enough margins involved for everyone to shift the orbit from a subsistence level to an entrepreneurial level. So what we have done is to ensure that while the digital highway is put out in terms of farm side, pre-harvest, post-harvest, agri inputs, market linkages, we also ensure that we don't reinvent the wheel. If there is a credit score that we have built, international bank like a Rabobank can plug in, we make sure that can happen, right? Otherwise, how do you lend to a new to credit farmer? If you want to sort of start insuring the cattle, which is probably the most important trackable, traceable, monitorable asset of a farmer, if they can be innovative car insurance, why can't they be innovative cattle insurance? If you and I can have unique Aadhaar ID, why can't animals have a unique unmanipulatable way to identify animals with facial recognition? So we think that the ecosystem play is pretty critical. Build out all these technologies like IoT that we use, sensor controllers, electronics, data science. You put it out in a way that it sort of also enables other players to participate. It enables, we have sort of, for example, partnering with an European cattle nutrition provider to ensure that a Europe-grade cattle nutrition, which hitherto was only available to a large farmer, can suddenly become available on a retail fashion to a smallholder farmer. Right? And these large corporates wouldn't come in until their profitability team is also taken care of. It's not a CSR initiative for them. So this digital highway that we have built up, which enables ecosystem players to come in, is I think fundamental to solving a hard problem. And I see most of the other lot of startups going that way in the fruits and agriculture, fruits and vegetable space, small ruminant space, going that way, which is very heartening to see.
Thanks a lot, Ranjit. Like very well articulated. And I think, as you mentioned, this is only going to further enable more and more companies to come in, more and more individuals to come into the sector. And one thing that I just wanted to point out, all the digitalization space, you see generally first generation farmers, like people who have not had any association with agriculture. This kind of talent we are able to bring into the agriculture, and also like creating cross-pollination of ideas. So something very beautiful. Sindhura, I would like to come back to you because in your previous role, you have been significantly involved with maternal and child health. And I just want to talk about nutritional availability and role dairy can play. Yeah, because if you see in India, western parts of the country are pretty much more the production regions, and then we have demand regions that are pretty much more the eastern part of the region, eastern part of the country. How do you see nutritional availability can further be enhanced and can very well manage through digitalization? Just throw some light on that.
Yeah, I used to work in maternal child health before, and nutrition as well, and especially funded many of the R&D initiatives in that space. So I see a lot of parallels in what I'm doing here. Nutrition is we should acknowledge, it's a very tough space to solve overnight. And that has been my learning, in that there are many things that need to come together for nutrition to be improved. The indicators, what we pick, one of the major lesson is things like stunting. There is a time lag. You cannot put 1 year, 2 year, 3 years timeline to improve stunting outcomes or even nutrition outcomes. By doing such aggressive outcomes, you actually may introduce harm. You may increase obesity. You may increase other problems. Nutrition is also not one-to-one. In that, I do some farm intervention to fortify rice with certain micronutrient, and expect that in the blood levels of the children of the farmers, it one-to-one matches. Because it goes through very complex economic and both macro and microeconomic transitions, and oftentimes it may not be consumed to the same level as it is produced. And so, but one thing does help, which is overall availability of inputs, whether it is agricultural or animal husbandry inputs, help. It raises the level of availability, and disposable availability of milk does improve the consumption as well. It may not be one-to-one, but it does. But it may help in other ways, such as improvement of income, and which in turn improves my nutritional input as a child. Right? My family's income level is improved, their poverty levels are changed. As a result, my overall improvement in nutritional levels is improved. But that alone may also not happen, because nutrition, unlike farming, where it's quite an economic activity. Farmers are the smartest economic thinkers, in that I put certain things and I expect certain return. It's not it's a very economic mindset in there. Whereas when it comes to purely on our children, a lot of social, how our grandmothers raised us, how our cultural food habits have shaped us, all that play into our nutritional input. And therefore, the educational and awareness, that side also has to be worked through. So when all of these come together, you can expect outcomes to be improved over time, and it should be over time. And their social inclusion is also important, because if you just work on general messaging, you will leave out certain parts. So for nutrition to be improved, that has been my experience working in the previous areas, previously in maternal child health, is we need to learn to see the system as a whole, but we need to be able to implement and execute on its parts. Only when you focus on certain things, that actually makes progress. If you sit and dream the overarching things and work on moving everything in 1 millimeter, progress doesn't happen. But if you just focus on one silver bullet, you won't address the whole of it. So think whole, but execute in parts. That has quite a few parallels to the area we are talking about. And agriculture and animal husbandry in particular, which provides more continued output, unlike agriculture, crop side, which is more seasonal, more annual, has quite an important role to play in nutritional improvement of our population. And we need to keep that in mind. We need to measure it. We need to work on innovative ways to address that. Innovation both in technology, innovation both in social studies and social science. And the private sector and marketing really knows how to sell to people. But when it comes to these kind of developmental aspects, we haven't taken a leaf on it, and we have taken that innovative ways to get to the audience. standard printing a poster and pasting it everywhere may not always get to reach the audience, and you have to take a leap from there and learn how to connect with our audience and how to bring it all together. Over to
Thanks,
you.
Sandra. I think, like, again, you have touched like another beautiful point is like getting to the audience. And I think this is where policymakers like always try to understand what is happening in the market and also how something can be conveyed to the audience. Ranjit, it actually brings me, like, I want to come to you with a question like on this. How do you think like digitalization is going to act as an enabler for the policymakers? Like, so this is where I see that industry is slightly ahead of the policymakers because of like how fast the digitalization actually happens. How do you think you are actually enabling the policymakers as well?
Yeah, so let me take a broad, swipe at it, right? And tech and innovation has always, in any sector, in any scheme of things, been a step ahead of policy, right? Policy always has a catching up to do. We have seen this, globally, be it the, blockchain segment, be it any other segment, the policy always has a catching up to do. But coming specifically to, agri and dairy, as you know, specifically in dairy, 50% of the organized sector is regulated by way of cooperative mechanisms, societies, federation. And hence what happens is this technology and innovation sourcing of that follows a very typical tendering mechanism. And tendering mechanism is a very cost plus sourcing. You're looking at who's the lowest bidder and then you're sourcing. It's not like a value-based sourcing. So I think we need to think of clever mechanism for these sectors that are regulated, like the cooperative sector. If they have to absorb more technology in, what kind of clever mechanisms can we adopt so that we move away from just a cost-based, cost plus tender-based sourcing to a more value-based sourcing, so that innovation technology can be absorbed quicker and faster into these segments. That's number one. Number two, it's a supply chain play at the end of the day, right? There is pre-harvest, post-harvest, it's a producer, there's a consumer, 80 million families feeding 1.3 billion protein consumers via milk. How do you sort of, in this embedded supply chain, there are multiple services that kick in to be able to give capital to the smallholder farmers to improve his herd size? Can we have mechanisms where things like the NPCI switching charges can be waived off when you know that the end beneficiary is a smallholder farmer? Otherwise, you're going to pass on that load to the farmer anyway, right? UPI is taken on in a big way. There's IMPS is taken on in a big way. NEFT is taken on in a big way. Government is taking steps in that direction. NEFT charges are waived off, but there are still some charges lurking in the background. Can those be further waived off, right? And so that we reap bigger benefits, so that these financial, switching charges can be waived off and the farmers get the benefit of it. Bank transfer charges, NPCI switching charges to enable real-time payments. Do understand that at the heart of this entire agri supply chain is a trade. There is a producer trying to produce good quality produce and selling it to a consumer through a bunch of intermediaries. How can you make sure that real-time payments can be enabled by waiving off some of these NPCI switching charges, bank transfer charges, and all of that? Third, I see a lot of silos of data existing. There's weather data, land records data, animal disease data. Can there be, through an NDLM type of initiative, can a harmonized access to this data be provided to the private sector so that we can build on top of that? The government has spent a humongous amount of time and energy in digitizing and providing, building up these databases, right? You'll be surprised when you look in, there's huge amount of work that has gone in, but making it available at whatever a nominal price or whatever is the competitive price to the private sector, so that they can build on top of it, stand on the shoulders of these giants to build the next level. That is going to be pretty useful. Whether land record digitization and huge amount of bureaucracy one has to run into to sort of gain access to it, but can this be made more seamless? I see a lot of intent from the government in this direction. I think it's a matter of time when that intent gets translated into specific action. The fourth, I also see a lot of intervention. I wouldn't call it intervention. I'd sort of see it more as an affirmative action on the market linkage side. So there is, whenever the SMP price, the skim milk prices, fluctuate, I suddenly see the government jumping in and regulating that price upwards or downwards. I think the free market should be let to play out its market dynamics. Interventions, affirmative intervention when our economy is below a limit is fine, but we reached a point where I don't think such interventions are warranted. We should let the free market forces play out and not sort of dabble around with playing the S&P prices by subsidizing exports and things like that. Finally, I think the time has arrived where the government should nudge this entire agri orbit from a quantitative orbit to a quality orbit. We need to have the guts to sign up to things like Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RCEP treaty, so that rather than be worrying about which international player will come and dump their produce in India, the world needs to be worried about how India's high quality products are now going to compete with us. So let me take some steps. So it sort of puts pressure on the quality and traceability type of orbit in the food sector, and goes in a big way in providing food security globally, because we are one of the largest producers of dairy and other proteins. So this is some of the top things in a broad swipe at policy, but I see steps being taken, but things that were on top of my radar.
Prashant, you're muted.
Yeah, I said, like, thanks a lot, Ranjit. I'm just wondering, why didn't I ask you this question, because it is so close to my heart as well. Thank you for that, like, great answer. We might be just overshooting the time, but I have one question each for you. Sindhura, what is your vision for next 10 years for India?
Oh, that's it. Thank you for asking the question, because that reflects on what I wanted to respond to Ranjit's very good concrete things that he was mentioning. And I do agree that oftentimes policy catches up with technology, but in this case, speaking on behalf of government, we are trying to catch up, and not just catch up with technology, but build a vision for planning next 15 years where the world might be, because otherwise if we plan for today, we are always going to be behind. So that's why NDLM is actively thinking on that part. And in terms of data, that is at the heart of it. Information is at the heart of it, and that too, not build it to catch information. If you try to make somebody's job to report and fill in forms, it will never work for various reasons, and that has huge psychological underpinnings as well. Data should be part of a byproduct of a well-functioning activity. So the hope for NDLM is to build the activity best. Farmer wants animal treated, veterinarian should have the ability, he should be able to reach the veterinarian should be able to have the supply of to treat it, and that transaction happens. Data is a byproduct of that seamless interaction. And when it doesn't happen, we should be able to know when that didn't happen. They should be able to know, and so that course corrects. So the whole heart of NDLM is not just siloed, but build that integration, because at the end of the day, when it touches the farmer, it's all the same. There is no silo in breeding, diseases, market, and everything. As a result, that information should be available to whoever is needing that. If I am a vaccine manufacturer, and if I don't have disease dynamics, where the disease is spreading, what kind of disease is spreading, and what kind of market segment is available, how can they plan for vaccine discovery, vaccine development, and plan for the next 10 years or 15 years? Right? That's the timeline that is needed if you want to be well prepared. That is true for animal vaccine manufacturers. It's true for any other industry that Ranjit is mentioning. So information should be available liquid and in a timely manner, in an integrated manner. So that's something I foresee will be changing hopefully as a result of NDLM and other efforts at ministry and in the sector that is happening. And finally, it's through this collaborative effort that you can actually truly make progress. Well, it seems very nice when I say it should be through collaboration. We all know nobody is against collaboration. But what I can tell you is we have this National Digital Livestock Mission NDLM blueprint, and it was set with a broad vision, and these are the general principles with which we need to act. And we are going through the formal consultation with various sectors. I hope NASCOM and its participants are also participate in this stakeholder consultation and give your feedback. But it's through this consultation, we at the government have learned so many things that we hadn't initially thought about. And we started doing pilots in partnership with these private sector and other actors. And through these pilots, we are learning to build, because we don't hold all the knowledge. And we need to be humble and realize that it is through these experiments that we get to a better and better improvement in this program. And it involves everybody. And as a result, we need to have that experimental mindset and not set things in stone. So over the next 10 years, what I see is these kind of participatory approach, this kind of enablement as the role of the government, and not doing things on its own, and lining things and incentives up so that properly, so that the pent up energy, there is a lot of pent up potential and energy itself drives the sector forward, and step in where it is necessary in the policy and legal matters. That is the mandate of the government, and continue to update and manage the basic architecture, whether it is credentialing, animal identity linked to farmers identity, and some key sectors where nobody else but the government can play their role. And those are all the areas I see as bright areas for for us to be engaged in, and I see enormous potential and possibilities in this sector.
Thanks a lot, Sindhura. Ranjit, because I'm already being informed that we have overshot the time, but last question to you, because now you also play a moderator role, because or also coach role, because you have so much of experience doing it by yourself. What one suggestion you have for the next upcoming young youth people, youth who's trying to come to the agriculture, trying to bring digitalization, or trying to do something in this space? What is the one suggestion that you want to give to them?
Yeah, no, so we have done a lot of mistakes, obviously. We continue to make a lot of mistakes. So we have, I wish we were wiser when we started than what we were, but then yes, that's how the life is. So one of the things that we realized, that when you set out to solve a hard problem, you just can't solve it with one facet, right? You need a combination of things. So it can't just be a smartphone application that can solve the problem. Right, today digitization is synonymous with I've launched an app, so I've digitized. Right, in this sector, you need software, you need data. People are shy to touch hardware. You need a hardware hook to bring this traditional supply chains online. Right, as I said, had I started this startup in the Valley, I probably would not have touched hardware, because supply chains are fairly online. I would have started at the software layer. But in India, you just need to do the first one-on-one hop, right? So take a more wholesome view. Don't be shy to touch areas that are traditionally not touched by the engineering innovation startups. Touch hardware, touch software, touch data. That's one. And two, don't be shy to touch operations, right? Because tech is an enabler. It's not an end goal. In India, to be able to solve the problems in a very in a compelling manner, you need to bundle business operations with technology, so that together it becomes a more compelling way to solve the problem. Otherwise, you run into a lot more hurdles, because it's not a solved problem. So hence, you need to solve a lot of it yourself. So unless you take a more comprehensive full stack approach, bundling business operations with technology, it gets a lot more harder. That's sort of, we didn't know this earlier. We were all techies. So as you know, when all you have is a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail, right? So we said, let's develop an application, let's do data. Then we realized, you need also to make business sense, and there is an upward business trajectory that you need to latch on in terms of EBITDA and in terms of all of that. What do you do for that? Then, okay, let me also touch hardware. Okay, by the way, you need market linkages. By the way, you need agri inputs. By the way, you need to run the supply chains. So take a full stack approach, business operations plus tech. Use tech as an enabler. It's not an end goal in itself. That's sort of one big learning for us. And that's sort of, I would encourage all the new folks coming into the sector to consider. They might have better ideas, but it's something this has been our learning in the sector.
Thanks a lot, Ranjit. I think our audience would have really a lot of and beautiful points to take. And with this, I would actually like to just conclude and say it's the beautiful engagement between the policy and the private players. And this is like going to create a powerhouse of agriculture and dairy in the upcoming decade. So thanks a lot to the organizers for the session, and thank you. Over to the moderator.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant, for driving the conversation. And thank you, Dr. Sindhura and Ranjit, for making the discussion so meaningful and lively with your great thoughts. So the one word that came to my mind was supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, or simply said, wonderful. The kind of discussion it was indeed wonderful to see the power of data and how it can actually revolutionize the entire agriculture industry. And thanks so much, dear panelists, for that such an enriching discussion.